Hey, what is up guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome back to Gran Turismo 7. So update 1.49 is on its way later this month to finally add a bit of refresh to GT7. It feels like it's been a long time coming. So with this update on the way, here's one final change I would absolutely love to see with this upcoming update, or really any update in the future. For me personally though, with update 1.49 set to be the big update of 2024 so far, I feel like this would be the perfect place to actually implement this feature that I'm going to talk about. However, first up we do need to give it a bit of context. So we're going to head over to the event directory. In total for GT7 there is currently 208 events. Now of course this is going to change over time, however this is still pretty poor for a mainline GT entry. In fact GT Sport ended up with 301 events in a shorter update time frame. In terms of the events, they have at most 16 per category and at least around about 3. It typically averages to 4 to 5 events per each category. So overall there is a lot of criticism from the player base that GT7 single player is just completely lacking, and that is entirely true, especially if we look at previous mainline entries. Even now there's some very typical GT events that are completely absent from GT7. So with that in mind, let's head back to update 1.40 or Spec 2 in November 2023. This was a massive overhaul to Gran Turismo 7, finally making it feel at least partly like a full mainline entry to the series. Prior to that, this game just felt all over the place. Before Spec 2 dropped, GT7 honestly felt like a game that just didn't know what it wanted to be. On one hand, you've got a developer that promised a return to the mainline form of the overall series after GT Sport really divided a lot of players. However, along comes GT7 that feels like a massive prologue to something bigger in terms of its single player content, mashed together with the entire GT Sport philosophy. It really didn't sit quite right with a lot of those original fans that were now returning for the promised return to form of the mainline series. Now of course it wasn't necessarily the worst racing game out there, of course there's a lot worse out there, but it wasn't perfect and it wasn't exactly what Kaz or Polyphony actually promised to deliver. Prior to Spec 2 there was a lot of criticism coming from every single which way about almost everything to do with GT7, and Spec 2 did really overhaul the game in a pretty substantial way. It made it feel like a much more complete game and a much more mainline series game. Was it perfect? No, but it didn't really have to be. Now a key single player change that came along with Spec 2 was actually the weekly challenges. This allowed players to go ahead and tackle 5 events on a weekly basis. Some were pre-existing, however some were special events. This has gone on every single week in GT7 bar one single week when we actually had a skipped week. So in terms of the overall special events though, these have managed to rack up around about 30 minimum different events, making a total possibility of around about 10 different categories that could have been added to the game. However, there's a key issue with special events. Of course, I'm talking about the fact that these special events cease to completely exist. Whilst we could see the same category come back at a different track, the entire time and effort it took to implement that special event is completely gone, with the event never ever to return. And for me, it feels like wasted event potential. Just taking a quick sneak peek at this week's special event says everything we need to know. This is an all JGTC event, something that GT7 players have been crying out for the longest time, and they did bring it. In fact, this is the second one we've seen. However, we all know that come the end of the week, that awesome special event is going to completely disappear from existence, and we don't necessarily know if it will ever return again. And it's a massive shame considering this is something that everyone wants. One of the most disappointing aspects of these special events disappearing is the fact that a lot of these will only run for a month or two at maximum. Of course, I'm talking about the series themselves. They'll typically put out anywhere from 2 to 3 events just to be never ever seen again. Now, one key feature of it is the fact that these have been so varied, covering everything that GT7's typical single player just hasn't. It even goes back to the days of GT2 with one make races and manufacturer events. We've seen everything from EV road cars going at it on a racetrack to track day toys, off-road racers. There really has been a massive variety covering all sorts of vehicles and different types of cars, something that GT7's key single player campaign is just really lacking it. So every single week we see that one special bit of variety just to be put into the game, to be completely removed after a week, and then maybe after a month or two we'll see that series entirely retired for something else. Even when these special events are at their absolute worst and probably their weakest, we still see the likes of the Renault 4 getting thrown around in a one make around a rally track. It really is much more variety than we do typically see in these standard events. So it's very obvious what I want the change to be. Of course, I'd love to see these special events work their way into the mainline single player experience after that week. I do agree that when they're first implemented they should be put on special event. However, once that week is done, that should then build itself up as an entirely new event, an entire new category inside the single player, instead of going to complete waste and then entirely disappearing after a month or two. As mentioned, that toll of events from 208 could have been well surpassed the 240 mark with 10 new categories actually implemented into the event directory. For me, it makes no sense to keep wasting these events, just implement them into the entire single player experience. Not only would this change buff up the entire single player experience, considering some of these have been some of the best events we've ever seen in GT7, it seems like a massive shame and a massive waste just to completely get rid of them after a set amount of time. Anyway, let me know what you think down in the comments below. Do you agree with me? Do you disagree with me? Let me know why. Hope you have a fantastic rest of your day. Take care, guys. Peace.